There is a chimney in Bradford that rises nearly 250 feet above the streets of Manningham, Italianate in style, campanile in form, modelled deliberately on the bell tower of St Mark's in Venice. And if you walk west from the city centre on a grey October morning, up the long rise of Manningham Lane toward Heaton, you will see it before you see anything else. Not the cathedral, not the town hall, not the mills themselves. Only the chimney, rising like a lighthouse above a city that spent most of a century trying to forget what it had been lit for. Manningham Mills covers 16.5 acres under a single set of roofs. At its peak, in 1895, it employed more than 11,000 workers. It was, at the time of its reconstruction in 1873, the largest silk mill in the world. 27 million bricks, cut locally at Calverley. 853 looms in one weaving shed. A chimney tall enough to be visible from 20 miles across the Pennines on a clear day. And running underneath all of it, a 90 horsepower steam engine named Dora, after the owner's wife, who would be dead inside the year the engine first turned. They walk the apartment show flats. They photograph the chimney from the car park. They point at the clock tower. They buy coffees in the gastropub at the foot of the South Block. And almost none of them ask the question that the chimney itself seems to insist upon. Why does a Yorkshire wool mill have a Venetian campanile 12 miles to the north in the valley of the River Aire? Titus Salt had spent the 1850s and 1860s building something that Victorian England chose to celebrate. Saltaire, the model industrial village, the mill with classrooms and almshouses and a library and a chapel, the factory that tried to prove industry could be moral. Its story is the story of Victorian philanthropy at its most generous. It was the wool empire built with a conscience. This is not that story. This is the story of the other empire, the one built 12 miles to the south by a man who had been Salt's contemporary, his occasional rival, his neighbour in the wool trade, and his opposite in almost every way that mattered. The story of a mill that made a baron, broke a strike, and accidentally helped to found the British Labour Party. The story of Samuel Cunliffe Lister, 1st Baron Masham, the richest self-made man in the north of England, and the 91 years he spent turning silk waste into a fortune, and that fortune into a political catastrophe. Manningham Mills is one of the most visible industrial buildings in northern England. Its chimney can be seen from the M62 15 miles away. Its east front runs longer than the facade of Buckingham Palace. It has been photographed by every documentary crew that has ever made a film about Victorian manufacturing. It is also one of the most politically consequential buildings in British history, because what Saltaire had been for Victorian paternalism, Manningham Mills became for Victorian industrial conflict. What began inside its spinning rooms in the winter of 1890 and the spring of 1891 ended in a change to British political life that Samuel Lister had neither intended nor imagined. The mill made him a baron. It also, by a chain of events that historians have traced and that Lister himself lived just long enough to see, helped to make the Labour Party. If you find these deep investigations into Britain's great industrial houses and the hidden lives within them worth your time, please subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment telling me which estate, mill, or dynasty we should explore next, and help these stories reach the audience they deserve. Samuel Cunliffe Lister was born on the 1st of January 1815 at Calverley Old Hall on the western edge of the Aire Valley, 4th son of Ellis Cunliffe Lister K, a Bradford gentleman with a woolen mill, a country house, and a seat in Parliament for the new borough of Bradford. The Listers were, by the standards of early Victorian Yorkshire, rich. They were not titled. They were not aristocratic. They were a family of the industrial gentry who had made their money in the first wave of Bradford textiles and who had educated their younger sons to join the family mill. Samuel hated the mill. He was sent to a private tutor at the age of 7, to Westminster School at 10, and was expected, like his brothers, to go into the church or the army. Neither took. He ran away from Westminster twice. He refused to go to Oxford. At 17, after a brief apprenticeship to a Liverpool cotton broker that ended badly, he presented himself at his father's mill in Bradford and asked for a job on the factory floor. His father put him on the stuff-making side, where he learned the machines, and by the age of 22, Samuel Lister was running his first worsted mill at Manningham in partnership with his brother John on capital loaned by their father. What made Lister rich was not wool. What made Lister rich was a machine. For 1,000 years, wool had been combed by hand. The wool comber was one of the most skilled, best paid, and most independent workers in the textile trade. He worked in his own cottage. He owned his own combs. He sold his combed wool to the spinner. In 1840, there were roughly 10,000 wool combers in West Yorkshire, and their union, the Wool Combers Friendly Society, was one of the strongest craft unions in Britain. Lister decided to destroy them between 1843 and 1851, working at first with a father Isaac Holden and then with other engineers. Samuel Lister developed a series of patents for a mechanical wool combing machine which automated in a single hour what a hand comber did in a day. The patents made him rich. They also destroyed the trade of hand combing. By 1858, hand combing had effectively disappeared from Yorkshire. 10,000 skilled workers and their families had been de-skilled or thrown out of work in less than a decade. Lister wrote in a private memoir published after his death that he had been paid in royalties alone between 1851 and 1860 more than £350,000. In modern money, this was a fortune of more than 40 million. At the age of 45, he was one of the richest men in the north of England. The money built Manningham Mills. In 1857, Lister bought the existing Manningham Mill, a stone worsted factory built in 1837 by the Dixon family on a commanding site north of the city centre, and began extending it. In 1865, he bought a bale of waste silk in a Liverpool auction. The bale was dirty, knotted, frayed, and commercially worthless, the sort of byproduct that silk merchants burned. Lister took it home, worked on it in a small experimental mill for the better part of a year, and developed a patented process for drawing, combing, and spinning silk waste into a usable yarn called Listerine silk, which could be woven into velvet and plush fabric and sold to the drapery trade at a fraction of the price of pure silk. It was not silk. It was better than silk. It was silk that ordinary families could afford. Orders poured in from America. Orders poured in from the courts of Europe. By 1870, Lister was selling velvet to the drapers of London and the uniform makers of Vienna and the upholsterers of the Tuileries. His income from silk waste alone, by 1871, was estimated at £100,000 a year. He was running 2 Manningham mills in parallel, the old stone building and a new brick extension that he called the Silk Warehouse. And he was planning a third. He was, at the age of 56, at the centre of an empire of thread. And then, on the night of the 22nd of February, 1871, the old stone mill caught fire. The fire started in the spinning shed at about 9 p.m, probably from an overheated bearing on a carding machine, and by midnight it had consumed the whole building. The Bradford Observer reported that the flames could be seen from Leeds. The loss was estimated at £150,000. Uninsured, the machinery, the wool, the silk waste, the looms, all gone. Samuel Lister stood on Manningham Lane at 3 o'clock in the morning, watching the walls of the old mill collapse, and, according to the memoir of his private secretary, said only this: "Very well, we shall build a bigger one." He did. What burned in Manningham in 1871 was not the end of Samuel Lister. It was the beginning of Manningham Mills. Within 6 weeks of the fire, Lister had commissioned the Bradford architects Andrews and Pepper, a firm known for civic buildings rather than industrial ones, to design a new mill on a scale that the British textile industry had never attempted. The brief was specific. It was to be the largest silk mill in the world. It was to occupy the full 16-acre site. Its chimney was to be the tallest industrial chimney in England, and it was to be, architecturally, a building that would remind every visitor to Bradford that Samuel Lister had arrived. The choice of style was deliberate. Andrews and Pepper had spent the previous decade designing non-conformist chapels and civic halls in the Italianate manner, and Lister wanted the same vocabulary applied to his mill. The main block was built in Italian Renaissance brick, with stone dressings and round arched windows in ranks of 13. The office range at the east end was given a triumphal clock tower. and the chimney, which was structurally unnecessary at the height chosen, was designed as a full campanile, with an internal stone staircase, 6 stages of recessed brick panels, and a crowning cornice. It was modelled, quite explicitly, on the campanile of St. Mark's in Venice, which had stood for almost 1,000 years before collapsing 3 decades later, in 1902, while Lister was still alive. The new mill opened in 1873. The opening was a civic event. The Mayor of Bradford attended. Queen Victoria sent a telegram of congratulations. The Bradford Observer printed a 4-page supplement with engravings of the principal interiors. Inside, the scale of the operation was unprecedented. The main weaving shed, on the ground floor of the South Block, held 853 looms under a single timber roof. The spinning floors above held 130,000 spindles. The combing rooms were the size of parish churches. The basement dye house consumed 18 tons of coal a day in winter. The main engine, an enormous horizontal compound built by Pollitt and Wigsell of Sowerby Bridge, was called Dora, after Lister's wife Anne Dora. Anne Dora died in childbirth in 1875, 2 years after the mill opened, and Lister never renamed the engine. Dora turned for the next 77 years. By 1890, Manningham Mills was the largest single textile enterprise in Britain. 11,000 workers, a number greater than the population of the borough of Bradford when Lister was born. More than 5.5 million yards of velvet woven a year. Orders from the White House, the Elysee, the Hofburg, and most of the great department stores of the east coast of America. Lister was given a baronetcy in 1887 in recognition of his contribution to British industry. Queen Victoria described him in a private note as the Velvet King. He had, by this point, left Manningham. He had bought Swinton Park, a 40,000-acre country estate in the Yorkshire Dales, for £189, £0, in 1882. He lived there in the manner of an old aristocratic house. He collected Italian paintings and Chinese porcelain. He stocked the moors with grouse. He entertained cabinet ministers and Rothschilds. He left the day-to-day management of Manningham Mills to his general manager, John Maxwell, and visited the Bradford site perhaps 3 or 4 times a year. Manningham was run on his behalf, and in the autumn of 1890, the running of Manningham on behalf of a baronet who had not lived in Bradford for 8 years produced, in the space of a few weeks, the worst industrial confrontation West Yorkshire had ever seen. On the 17th of December, 1890, every wool dyer, every silk weaver, and every plush hand in the Manningham plant received a letter. The letter was signed by John Maxwell, the general manager, and it was short. It informed the workers that with effect from the first payday of January 1891, wages in the plush and velvet departments would be cut by 30%. No notice, no consultation, no right of appeal. The reason given, in Maxwell's letter, was the McKinley Tariff, a protectionist act passed through the United States Congress in October 1890, which had imposed a duty of up to 50% on imported plush and velvet fabric. American buyers had cancelled their spring orders. The mill had lost roughly 1/3 of its American market in a month. The cut, Maxwell wrote, was necessary to preserve the business. The plush and velvet workers were the aristocracy of the Manningham workforce. A skilled weaver took 10 years to train. His wages were already modest by the standards of the Bradford trades, roughly 30 shillings a week for a full week's work. A 30% cut would take him below the earnings of an unskilled porter. He had no other market for his skills. The plush trade existed, for practical purposes, in one mill and one mill only. Within 48 hours, the plush and velvet workers had walked out. Within a week, they had been joined by the dyers and the silk sorters. Within a fortnight, by Christmas Eve 1890, the strike had spread to most of the rest of the mill. Of the 11,000 employees, approximately 5,000 were out. The rest were kept at work, under police protection, and in some cases under threat. The Manningham Mill strike had begun. It ran for 19 weeks. The strike committee met at the Oddfellows Hall in Thornton Road. Its chairman was Samuel Shafto, a former soldier turned wool sorter, a Methodist lay preacher, and one of the finest platform orators in Yorkshire. Its secretary was William Henry Drew, a spinner in his mid-30s, thin, severe, and a committed reader of Robert Owen and Thomas Carlyle. Its treasurer was James Bartley, a wool sorter who would, a decade later, found the Bradford Pioneer newspaper and be elected to Bradford City Council. These three men, along with a revolving committee of about 15, ran the most disciplined industrial strike Yorkshire had ever seen. Subscription lists were opened in every Bradford chapel. Soup kitchens were established in 6 different halls. Shopkeepers extended credit. The liberal Bradford Observer reported sympathetically. The Bradford Labour Union, a year-old body of radical workmen, raised funds across the north of England. By the end of January 1891, the Manningham Strike Fund stood at more than £9,000. By the end of February, it was £14,000. Workers in other Yorkshire mills sent donations. Workers in Lancashire cotton mills sent donations. A bricklayers' union in London sent £25. The strike became, in the language of the Victorian Labour press, a national question. Lister did not speak publicly. He was at Swinton Park. He was, according to Maxwell's later testimony to the Board of Trade, in daily communication with the mill. But he did not address the strike, did not meet the committee, and did not come to Bradford once during the 19 weeks the dispute lasted. The strike was conducted by a baronet who refused to be in the same room as the workers striking against him. The mass meetings began in early March. The Bradford Corporation had closed all the public halls to the strike committee under pressure from the mill's legal representatives. The committee moved its meetings to Peel Park, a public space on the northeast edge of the city where the municipal bylaws did not apply. On Sunday, the 12th of April 1891, 40,000 people gathered in Peel Park to hear speeches. On Sunday, the 19th of April, 60,000, the Home Office, alarmed by the scale, sent a detachment of Metropolitan Police to assist the West Riding Constabulary. The confrontation came on Easter Monday, the 13th of April 1891, at a rally in the town centre. The Chief Constable, Sir Charles Paul, ordered the crowd to disperse on the grounds that they were obstructing the highway. The order was, according to the strike committee, read without warning from the steps of the town hall. The crowd did not disperse. Paul ordered a mounted charge. 48 people were treated for injuries at the Bradford Royal Infirmary that night. The Riot Act was read. Troops were brought in from the garrison at Halifax. For 3 days, Bradford was, in the phrase of the Observer, under military government. On 27th of April, 1891, after 19 weeks without wages, the strike committee accepted defeat. The Manningham workers returned to work on Maxwell's terms, with the full 30% wage cut in place. Samuel Shafto was blacklisted across the Bradford trade. William Drew lost his job. James Bartley found work in a smaller mill at reduced wages. The strike fund, which had sustained 5,000 families for nearly 5 months, was distributed to the most destitute and wound up. Samuel Lister did not attend the closing negotiation. He was in London. On the 25th of June, 1891, 2 months after the strike collapsed, he was created Baron Masham of Swinton in the peerage of the United Kingdom. The barony was presented, in the words of his patent, in recognition of his contribution to British manufacturing. The Bradford Trades and Labour Council, in an open letter to the Observer, called it a reward for breaking us. What Lister did not understand, and what history would prove, was that he had lost. The Manningham workers had come to the strike as Liberal voters. The Bradford seats in Parliament had been Liberal for 30 years. The Bradford press was Liberal. The Bradford chapels were Liberal. The nonconformist free trade voting Liberal tradition of the West Riding was, until 1890, the unquestioned political identity of the Bradford working class. In January 1891, while the strike was still on, the local Liberal MP, Alfred Illingworth, a textile manufacturer and Lister's near neighbour in the trade, declined to support the strikers publicly. He argued that the McKinley tariff, not the mill management, was the true author of the wage cut. His speech was reprinted in the Observer. It was received in the strike committee rooms as a betrayal. The strike ended in April 1891. By December 1891, the Bradford Trades Council and the Bradford Labour Union had begun holding public meetings arguing that the workers needed their own political party. In February 1892, the Bradford Labour Union ran its first independent candidate in a municipal election. He came second. In November 1892, a 26-year-old compositor called Fred Jowett, who had helped on the Manningham Strike Committee as a young man, was elected as an independent Labour councillor for the Manningham ward. He was the first of more than 100 on the 13th and 14th of January 1893 in an upper room of the Labour Institute at 29 Peckover Street in central Bradford. Roughly 120 delegates from labour unions, trade councils and radical clubs across Britain met to found a new political party. Keir Hardie took the chair. Ben Tillett spoke from the floor. Tom Mann attended. The Bradford delegation included Fred Jowett, James Bartley and Robert Blatchford, the editor of the socialist newspaper, The Clarion. The meeting sat for 2 days. At the end of the second day, it voted to constitute itself as the Independent Labour Party with a programme explicitly committed to the collective ownership of the means of production. The ILP was not founded because of the Manningham strike alone. It was the product of 2 decades of socialist and trade union organising, of the dock strike of 1889, of the work of Hundman and Morris and Engels and the Fabian Society. But it was founded in Bradford, in an upstairs room less than a mile from the Manningham chimney, because Bradford in 1893 was the city where the Liberal Party had most visibly abandoned the working class, and the Bradford where the Liberal Party had most visibly abandoned the working class was the Bradford of the Manningham strike. Fred Jowett was elected Member of Parliament for Bradford West in 1906, the year Samuel Lister died. He held the seat for the ILP and then for Labour until 1918, and then again from 1922 to 1931. He was the first working class MP for a large industrial constituency in British history. His election, in the words of the historian Ross McKibben, was the direct political child of Peckover Street, and Peckover Street was the direct political child of Manningham. Samuel Lister lived to see it. He died at Swinton Park on the 2nd of February 1906, 3 weeks after Labour's first parliamentary breakthrough at the general election, which had returned 29 Labour members. He was 91 years old. He had been made a baron by Queen Victoria in 1891. He had been the richest commoner in England. He had built the largest silk mill in the world. And he had, by cutting his plush weaver's wages 30% 15 years earlier, accelerated the birth of a political movement that would, within 40 years, nationalise his entire industry. But the mill that astonishes every visitor who stands at its foot was not built by the baron whose name is carved above its door. Their presence at Manningham is documented, recorded in ink on paper in the Manningham Mills wage books, now held by the West Yorkshire Archive Service in Bradford, in an unbroken series from 1860 to 1971. Their stories are not. There was a wool sorter called John Tankard, who was paid 32 shillings a week in 1877 and who died in 1878 at the age of 40 of what his doctor recorded as wool sorter's pneumonia, and which we now know to have been pulmonary anthrax, a disease contracted from the spores in the raw Turkish and Persian fleeces that Manningham imported. Tankard was one of at least 14 Bradford wool sorters who died of anthrax between 1875 and 1890. His name appears in the Bradford Board of Health report of 1881. He is buried in Undercliff Cemetery. His widow received no pension. There was a plush weaver called Emma Whittam, 15 years old at the time of the strike, who was named as a delegate to a strike committee sub-meeting in March 1891. In a report in the Bradford Observer, we know nothing else about her. She does not appear in the mill's return to work register after the strike ended, which suggests either that she was blacklisted or that she left the trade. She is one of approximately 800 female strikers, of whom perhaps a dozen are named anywhere in the surviving record. There was a half-timer called William Binns, 9 years old in 1872, when he started on the spinning floor at Manningham as a piecer, working 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, for a weekly wage of 3 shillings. He attended Manningham Lane School in the afternoons until the age of 12, when he was promoted to full-time mill work. He was still at Manningham in 1921 as a foreman in the dye house at the age of 58. His death in 1933 was recorded in the Bradford Observer as a familiar figure at Lister's for over 60 years. His first name survived because of the obituary, nothing else. There were women, there were spinners and reelers and plush hands and burlers and pickers, and a generation of girls who started on the factory floor at 8, 9 and 10 years old under the half-time system until the age of compulsory full-time schooling was raised in 1891, and for whom the mill was the only employer they would ever have. The 1881 Bradford census records 2,674 female textile workers living within half a mile of Manningham Lane. The mill's own wage books name perhaps 300 of them. The rest are in the bureaucratic euphemism of the period and others. They appear in the records as footnotes, a name beside a sum, a quarterly wage entered into a bound ledger, and then they vanish into the silence that swallows everyone in a great industrial building who is not a member of the family that owns it. We do not know their faces. We do not know how they slept, except in terraced rows of back-to-back housing along the streets that still run down the hill from the mill. We do not know how they died, except in general of lung disease, of childbirth, of accidents, of ordinary lives ordinarily ended. We know only that they were there, that the mill they made is still standing, and that their names survived, some of them because the Manningham wage books and the Bradford newspapers and the reports of the Board of Health were kept, and nobody threw them away. Lister made plush velvet for the Empress of Austria. Other men and women made it for him in 6 hours in a dye house at 38 degrees centigrade for 32 shillings a week, and died at 40 of a disease that had no name in their parish register. The mill absorbed both. Manningham did not end with Samuel Lister. The Manningham Mills Company, owned by Lister's sons and grandsons, continued to operate the complex through the First World War, supplying parachute silk to the Royal Flying Corps, and through the Second, supplying canvas to the War Office. The 1920s were prosperous. The 1930s were not. Silk lost its market to rayon and then to nylon. The American plush trade, which had built the mill, never recovered from the tariff wars of the 1930s. By 1950, Manningham was employing fewer than 1,000 people. By 1980, fewer than 300. In June 1992, the last weaver walked out. Dora, the great engine, had been shut down for decades. The building was mothballed. It did not stay mothballed. In the early hours of February 2nd, 2003, by coincidence, the anniversary of Samuel Lister's death, a fire broke out in the disused north range of the main block. It burned for 18 hours. 3 floors of the original 1873 structure were destroyed. The cause was never formally established. It was the second great fire the building had survived. In 2000, the Manchester-based regeneration company Urban Splash had bought the whole complex for redevelopment. Between 2003 and 2008, the surviving main block was converted into luxury apartments. The clock tower became a private penthouse. The weaving shed, where 853 looms had stood, became a car park. The dye house was demolished. The chimney, which had been scheduled for demolition on safety grounds, was saved by a local heritage campaign, restored at a cost of £1.5 million, and listed Grade 2 star in 2009. On a grey October morning today, you can walk through the archway that used to admit the wool carts into a landscaped courtyard lined with one-bedroom apartments. You can buy coffee in the ground floor cafe. You can read the discreet bronze plaque that describes the 1890 to 1891 strike in 7 lines. And then you can walk out to the street, look up at the chimney, and see what every Bradford child for 150 years has seen. A Venetian campanile above a Pennine city, still the tallest thing on the skyline. still visible from 15 miles away, still the signature of a man who died a baron and lived long enough to watch his workers found a political party in a room less than a mile from his front gate, stand at the foot of the chimney on a November afternoon, stand at the foot of the Manningham chimney on a November afternoon, with the low sun catching the 8 brick panels of its upper stage, and you see what every Bradford citizen has seen for 4 generations, a silhouette of industry, a tower on a hill, a campanile rising above the terraces, but look closer and the picture complicates. The brick has been repointed. The cornice is a 2009 reconstruction. The clock tower's cupola was replaced in 1978 after a gale brought the original down. The weaving shed is not there. The dye house is not there. The gate that admitted 5,000 workers on a shift in 1890 now admits residents with key cards to an underground car park. The whole building is a curated memory of a lost industry wearing the costume of a Venetian civic hall. Manningham Mills is not one building. It is a statement, in brick, of everything Victorian England wanted to believe about industry and could not finally make come true. Samuel Lister wanted a mill that proved the self-made northern industrialist had arrived at the top of English society. He built Manningham. He wanted to be a baron. The mill made him one. He wanted his workers to accept a 30% wage cut in silence. The mill gave him a strike that lasted 19 weeks, a riot in the town centre, and a political party founded in Bradford in January 1893 that would, within a generation, form the government of the country that had ennobled him. The mill gave him everything he asked of it. The mill always gives. That is its genius, and that is its cost, because what Manningham has also always preserved in its wage books and its strike pamphlets and its burial registers is the names of the John Tankards and the Emma Whittams and the William Binnses, without whom the mill could not have turned a loom for a single shift. Lister made the Velvet Empire. They made the velvet. Lister is buried under a marble monument at Swinton. Tankard is buried under a stone the size of a brick at Undercliff. Manningham Mills asked the same question that all great houses ask, but with a sharpness that no other industrial building in Britain quite matches. Who does a factory belong to? The baron, whose name is above the gate? The 5,000 workers who walked out in December 1890 and came back beaten in April? The delegates who went from the strike committee to an upstairs room on Peckover Street and founded the party that would nationalise half the industry of the country? The residents who now pay £1,800 a month for a one-bedroom flat above the old spinning floor? The Urban Splash shareholders who bought the whole complex for less than the value of the chimney alone, or the hill itself? The Manningham Bridge rising west of the city centre, where a 9-year-old piecer called William Binns walked to work in 1872, and where, 150 years later, the bricks he helped to clean are still standing. Manningham does not answer. The mill never answers. It simply stands, brick and stone, and silent above a city that once depended on it and now forgets, most days, that it is there, and lets you decide. And on the chimney, halfway up the second stage, there is a small panel of brick that is very slightly lighter than the surrounding work, because it was replaced in 1891. After a strikebreaker threw a stone at the building during the riot of Easter Monday. If you know where to look, you can still see it. Nothing is written on it. Nothing needs to be. They are still down there. They always will be. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see a building differently, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me which estate, mill, or dynasty we should investigate next. There are hundreds of these stories waiting to be told, and every one of them is hiding something beneath the surface.